When my 15-year-old daughter stood up at my husband's promotion celebration, pulled out her phone, and said, "Should I play the recording where Grandma calls Mom a gold-digging manipulator who trapped Dad?" The entire backyard party went silent. My mother-in-law's champagne glass slipped from her hand and shattered on the patio stones. Her face drained of all color. And after that night, she never spoke to our family again. Let me tell you exactly how we got there. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Isabella Chen, and from the outside, my life probably looks like something straight out of a lifestyle magazine. Beautiful home in Westfield with the white picket fence, a husband who adores me, and a teenage daughter who's somehow managed to stay sweet despite navigating high school in 2024. I'm a successful real estate agent. David works as a software engineer at a growing tech company, and together we've built what most people would call the American dream. But what people don't see are the hairline cracks that run through even the most picture-perfect foundations, the subtle warfare that happens behind closed doors, especially when it involves someone like Patricia Chen, my mother-in-law. Patricia is the kind of woman who can smile while delivering a knife to your back, who wraps her cruelty and concern so expertly that you almost believe she means well. She's elegant in that old money way, even though David's family was solidly middle class growing up. She carries herself like royalty, speaks in measured tones, and has perfected the art of the backhanded compliment. To everyone else, she's charming, gracious, a devoted mother and grandmother. But to me, she's been a constant reminder that I will never be good enough for her precious son. You see, I wasn't Patricia material, not even close. I grew up in a small apartment above my parents' Chinese restaurant in Queens. My mother worked 16-hour days in the kitchen while my father managed the front of house, and I spent my childhood doing homework at table 6. The smell of garlic and soy sauce permanently embedded in my school clothes. I learned English from customers, Mandarin from my grandmother, and determination from watching my parents build something from nothing. When I met David at NYU, I was working 3 part-time jobs to pay for a degree in business, living on ramen, noodles, and pure ambition. David fell in love with my drive, my warmth, the way I could make him laugh until his sides hurt. He loved that I came from a family that showed affection through food and noise and fierce loyalty. But Patricia saw something else entirely. She saw a girl from the wrong side of town who was obviously after her son's potential. Never mind that David was a struggling computer science student when we met, driving a 15-year-old Honda and living in a studio apartment with a mattress on the floor. In Patricia's mind, I had somehow identified his future earning potential and strategically positioned myself to benefit from it. Our relationship began rocky and only got worse over time. The first time David brought me home for dinner, Patricia spent the evening asking pointed questions about my family's little restaurant and whether I planned to help out there forever. When I explained that I was studying business and hoped to get into real estate, she smiled that thin smile and said, "How ambitious. David's always been attracted to projects." That was my introduction to Patricia Chen's particular brand of warfare, criticism disguised as observation, insults wrapped in silk. Over the years, her disapproval manifested in 1,000 small cuts. When David proposed after graduation, she sighed and said, "Well, I suppose young men never listen to their mothers anyway." When we got married in a beautiful but budget-conscious ceremony at my parents' restaurant, she told everyone it was quaint and very authentic. When I started my real estate career and struggled those first few years, she would ask David, in front of me, if he was managing okay financially with my experimental career phase. But David loved me fiercely, defended me when he could, and slowly began to see his mother's behavior for what it was. Still, he was caught between 2 women he loved, trying to keep peace while Patricia chipped away at our foundation one comment at a time. He wanted his mother's approval, wanted her to love me the way he did, and for years I enabled that hope because I wanted the same thing. When our daughter Sophia was born, I thought everything would change. Surely becoming a grandmother would soften Patricia's edges, create common ground between us. And for a while, it seemed like it might. Patricia cooed over baby pictures, bought expensive gifts, and seemed genuinely delighted to have a granddaughter. But even then, the comments continued. "She's beautiful, but I hope she gets David's height. Such dark hair, just like yours. We'll have to work on her posture as she gets older." As Sophia grew, Patricia's influence became more concerning. She would make subtle comments about appearance, about achievement, about what was expected from a Chen family member. She bought Sophia clothes that were too mature, enrolled her in activities without asking us first, and constantly compared her to other children in ways that made my daughter self-conscious. But Sophia was smart, observant, and surprisingly, resilient. She learned early how to navigate her grandmother's moods, how to deflect criticism with humor, how to stay true to herself while keeping the peace. By the time Sophia turned 15, she had grown into an incredible young woman. She inherited David's analytical mind and my stubborn streak, combined with a natural empathy that amazed us both. She was the kind of teenager who volunteered at animal shelters, maintained a 4.0 GPA, and somehow managed to stay close to both her parents despite being at that age where most kids think their parents are embarrassing. She also had developed a keen sense of justice and an inability to tolerate unfairness, traits that would prove crucial in the months leading up to that explosive evening. The shift in our family dynamics began subtly, as these things often do. David had been working on a major project at his company for over a year, leading a team developing new security software. It was high-pressure, high-stakes work, and he'd been putting in 12-hour days for months. When the project succeeded beyond everyone's expectations, his promotion to senior engineering manager came with a significant salary increase and the respect of his entire industry. We were thrilled, proud, and ready to celebrate this milestone that represented years of hard work and dedication. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Patricia, however, had a different perspective on David's success. In her mind, this promotion validated what she'd always believed, that David was destined for greatness, and that I had simply been lucky enough to position myself in his orbit before anyone else realized his potential. She began making comments about how I must be so relieved that things had worked out, how fortunate I was that David had pulled me up with him, how I should be grateful for the life his hard work had provided. These comments stung, but they weren't new. What was new was how they began to affect Sophia. My daughter started asking questions about our early relationship, about how her father and I had met, about whether I had really loved him before he became successful. She seemed troubled by something, distant in a way that reminded me of Noah's behavior in the original story, but I couldn't pinpoint what was wrong. Then came the day that changed everything. It was a Thursday afternoon, and I was showing a house to potential buyers when my phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. "Picking up Sophia from school today. She wants to hear stories about her father's childhood." This wasn't unusual. Patricia often picked Sophia up when David and I were both working, and Sophia genuinely enjoyed hearing family stories. What I didn't know was that this particular car ride would be different, that Patricia had decided it was time to share her version of our family's origin story. When Sophia came home that evening, she was quiet, thoughtful in a way that made my stomach clench with familiar dread. She hugged me a little tighter than usual, studied my face a little longer, and when I asked about her day, she just said, "It was interesting." I wanted to press, to understand what had shifted, but Sophia had always been someone who processed things internally before sharing, so I gave her space. Over the next few days, I noticed small changes. Sophia would look at me with this expression I couldn't quite read, like she was trying to solve a puzzle. She asked casual questions about our wedding, about the early years of my marriage to her father, about what I had wanted to be when I grew up. Normal teenage curiosity, except for the way she studied my answers, like she was checking them against some other information. The breakthrough came on a Saturday morning when David was out for his weekly bike ride. Sophia found me in the kitchen, making coffee and reviewing listings for the weekend's open houses. She sat down at the island, fidgeted with her phone for a moment, and then said, "Mom, can I ask you something?" "Always," I said, settling into the chair across from her. "Did you really love Dad when you married him? Or did you marry him because you thought he'd be successful someday?" The question hit me like a physical blow. I set down my coffee cup carefully, my hands suddenly shaking. "Sophia, why would you ask me something like that?" She looked down at her phone, swiping through something I couldn't see. "Grandma Patricia said some things when she picked me up from school. She said you were really smart about seeing Dad's potential before anyone else did. She said you were ambitious and that you knew how to position yourself for the future. She made it sound like you planned everything." I felt that familiar rage building, the fury that came from watching someone poison my child's mind with lies. But I also felt something else: determination. I was not going to let Patricia's toxic narrative take root in my daughter's heart the way it had tried to take root in my marriage. "Sophia," I said, choosing my words carefully, "your father was broke when I met him. He was studying computer science, driving a car that broke down twice a week, and living in an apartment the size of our walk-in closet. If I was looking for financial security, I would have chosen someone very different." She nodded slowly, but I could see the uncertainty in her eyes. "But Grandma said you were really focused on getting ahead, that you knew what you wanted and went after it." "I was focused on getting ahead," I admitted. "I was focused on building a life for myself that was different from the one I grew up in. But I fell in love with your father because he was kind, because he made me laugh, because he treated my parents with respect when he could barely afford to take me out for pizza. I married him because I couldn't imagine my life without him, not because I thought he'd make me rich." Sophia was quiet for a long moment, processing. Then she said something that made my heart skip a beat. "I recorded our conversation that day, the one with Grandma Patricia." I stared at her. "You what?" "I've been recording our car rides for a few weeks now," she said, her cheeks flushing slightly. "Not to be sneaky, but because she sometimes says things that don't feel right, and I wanted to be able to think about them later. When she started talking about you that day, something felt really wrong about it, so I made sure I got it all." My daughter, my brilliant, intuitive daughter, had been collecting evidence. She had sensed the toxicity in her grandmother's words and had instinctively moved to protect our family's truth. I was proud and heartbroken at the same time, proud of her wisdom and heartbroken that she'd felt the need to use it. "Can I hear it?" I asked gently. Sophia hesitated, then nodded. She pulled up the recording on her phone, and for the next 10 minutes, I listened to Patricia's voice, sweet and conspiratorial, telling my daughter a story about how I had cleverly positioned myself in David's life, how I had recognized his potential early and made myself indispensable before he realized what was happening. She described our love story as a calculated campaign, painting me as a manipulative opportunist who had trapped her innocent son. But what made it worse was how she framed it as a compliment, as if my supposed manipulation was actually admirable. "Your mother is very smart, Sophia," Patricia's voice said through the phone speaker. "She saw what your father could become and made sure she was there when it happened. Not many women have that kind of strategic thinking. You should learn from her example." When the recording ended, I sat in silence for a moment, processing the full scope of what Patricia had done. She hadn't just insulted me. She had tried to corrupt my daughter's understanding of love itself, to teach her that relationships were transactions, that women succeeded by trapping men rather than by loving them. "Mom," Sophia said softly, "I know it's not true. I can see how you and Dad look at each other. I can see how you take care of each other, but it made me really angry that she would say those things about you, especially to me." I reached across the table and took her hand. "I'm sorry you had to hear that, sweetheart. And I'm sorry you felt like you needed to record your conversations with your grandmother." "I'm not sorry," Sophia said, her voice stronger now. "I think people should know who she really is." That's when I saw it, the same look I remembered. From Noah in the original story. Determination. My daughter wasn't just defending me, she was preparing for something. She had the evidence, she had the moral clarity, and she had the courage that comes from seeing an injustice that needs to be corrected. David's promotion celebration was planned for the following weekend. Patricia had insisted on helping organize. It had invited colleagues and friends, had made it clear that this was David's moment to shine. She had also made it clear that she would be giving a speech about David's journey, about the family support that had gotten him to this point. As we planned the party together, I watched Sophia carefully. She was helpful, cheerful, excited about celebrating her father's achievement. But there was something else there, a quiet intensity that reminded me of the calm before a storm. She asked detailed questions about the guest list, about the schedule, about when Patricia would be speaking. She was planning something, and I had a feeling I knew what it was. The night before the party, Sophia came to my room as I was getting ready for bed. "Mom," she said, "tomorrow at the party, when Grandma Patricia talks about Dad's success and the family support he's had, do you think people should know the whole truth about what she really thinks?" I looked at my daughter, this remarkable young woman who had inherited the best parts of both her parents and somehow transcended our limitations. "Sophia," I said carefully, "what are you thinking?" She smiled, and for a moment she looked exactly like David when he was plotting something mischievous. "I'm thinking that Grandma Patricia has been talking about family loyalty and support for years, and maybe it's time everyone heard what she really means by that." I knew I should probably discourage her, should tell her that family drama didn't belong at public celebrations, that we should handle this privately. But I also knew that private conversations with Patricia had never changed anything, that she continued her toxic behavior because she'd never faced real consequences for it. "Are you sure you want to do this?" I asked. "I'm sure," Sophia said. "She hurt you, and she tried to make me believe lies about my own parents. Someone needs to tell the truth." And that's how we ended up here, standing in our backyard the next evening, surrounded by David's colleagues and friends, watching Patricia hold court about the importance of family support, while my daughter sat quietly with her phone, waiting for the perfect moment to play a recording that would change everything. The morning of David's celebration dawned bright and clear, one of those perfect late spring days that makes you believe everything is possible. I woke up early, my stomach churning with a mixture of excitement for David and apprehension about what Sophia might be planning. She had been unusually calm all week, helping with party preparations with the kind of focused determination that reminded me of myself when I was closing a particularly challenging real estate deal. David was practically bouncing around the house, his excitement infectious despite my nerves. This promotion represented more than just career advancement for him. It was validation of years of late nights, weekend coding sessions, and the countless times he'd chosen to push through challenges rather than give up. He'd started at the company as a junior developer, working his way up through pure talent and dedication, and seeing him finally receive the recognition he deserved filled me with fierce pride. "Can you believe it is?" he said, pulling me into his arms in the kitchen while coffee brewed. "Senior engineering manager. I keep thinking I'm going to wake up and find out it was all a dream." I smiled, running my hands over his chest, feeling the rapid beat of his heart. "You earned every bit of this, David. You've worked harder than anyone I know." We earned it, he corrected, kissing my forehead. I couldn't have done any of this without you believing in me, especially during those first few years when I was debugging code until 3 in the morning and questioning whether I'd chosen the right career. Those early years felt like a lifetime ago. I remembered the tiny apartment we'd shared, how David would fall asleep at his laptop and I'd find him there in the morning, surrounded by empty coffee cups and crumpled notebook paper. I remembered working open houses on weekends while he attended, programming boot camps, both of us scraping together every dollar to invest in our future. We'd been a team from the beginning, supporting each other's dreams even when we could barely afford groceries. Patricia arrived mid-morning, arms full of expensive flowers and a superior expression that immediately set my teeth on edge. She swept into our house like she owned it, rearranging my carefully chosen decorations and making subtle suggestions about everything from the music playlist to the appetizer presentation. "Isabella, dear," she said, adjusting the angle of a picture, frame that had been perfectly fine. "I hope you've prepared enough food. David's colleagues will be here, and we want to make sure we're representing the family properly." The implication was clear. She didn't trust me to handle something this important without her guidance. I bit back my initial response and instead smiled graciously. "Everything's under control, Patricia. I've been planning events for clients for years." "Of course," she said, her tone suggesting that planning real estate open houses was hardly preparation for hosting David's professional contacts. "I brought some additional catering from that lovely place downtown, just to be safe." Sophia appeared in the doorway, having clearly overheard the exchange. "Actually, Grandma Patricia, Mom's an amazing hostess. Remember last year's neighborhood barbecue? Mrs. Henderson still talks about Mom's Korean bulgogi tacos. She got the recipe from her friend who owns 3 successful restaurants." I caught Sophia's eye and saw the steel beneath her sweet tone. She was already in protective mode, already building her case. Patricia's smile faltered slightly, unused to being contradicted by her granddaughter. "I'm sure it will be lovely," Patricia said stiffly. "Sophia, why don't you help me arrange these flowers while your mother finishes her preparations?" "Actually," Sophia said cheerfully, "I promised Dad I'd help him set up the sound system. He wants to make sure everyone can hear clearly when people give their speeches tonight." The emphasis on clearly was subtle, but unmistakable. I had to turn away to hide my expression, busying myself with checking the refrigerator one more time. My daughter was already laying groundwork, ensuring that when her moment came, there would be no technical difficulties, no excuses, no way for anyone to miss what she had to share. The afternoon flew by in a whirlwind of preparation. I found myself stealing glances at Sophia throughout the day, amazed by her composure. She helped set up tables, arranged chairs, tested the microphone system twice, and chatted easily with early arriving guests. To anyone watching, she was simply an excited teenager celebrating her father's success, but I could see the careful attention she paid to every detail. The way she positioned herself near the sound system, the way she kept her phone charged and easily accessible. David's colleagues began arriving around 5, a mix of developers, project managers, and senior executives who had worked with him over the years. It was gratifying to see the genuine warmth in their greetings, the way they spoke about David's leadership and technical skills. These weren't just professional courtesies. These were people who truly respected my husband's abilities and character. Marcus Rodriguez, David's former mentor and now the company's chief technology officer, pulled me aside while David was showing off his latest project to a group of developers. "Isabella," Marcus said, his voice warm with sincerity, "I want you to know how proud I am of David, but also how grateful I am for your support over the years. I've watched a lot of talented engineers burn out because they didn't have strong partnerships at home. David's always talked about you as his greatest asset, not because of what you do for him, but because of who you are together." His words, hit me harder than I expected, bringing tears to my eyes. "Thank you, Marcus. That means everything." "I'm serious," he continued. "The way David lights up when he talks about your real estate successes, the way he brags about Sophia's achievements, the way he describes your family adventures, it's clear that his happiness comes from the life you've built together, not just from work accomplishments. That kind of foundation is rare." As Marcus spoke, I noticed Patricia hovering nearby, clearly listening to our conversation. Her expression was carefully neutral, but I caught the slight tightening around her, eyes that indicated displeasure. Here was yet another person crediting our partnership, our mutual support, rather than viewing me as some opportunistic appendage to David's success. The evening progressed beautifully. David moved through the crowd with confidence and grace, equally comfortable discussing technical specifications with his development team and sharing funny family stories with our neighbors. I watched him with such pride, remembering the shy computer science student I'd fallen in love with and marveling at the confident leader he'd become. As dinner wound down and people began gathering for the speeches, Sophia positioned herself strategically near the portable speaker we'd set up for announcements. She looked stunning in a navy blue dress that made her look older than her 15 years, her dark hair pulled back in an elegant bun that showcased the intelligence in her eyes. Marcus spoke first, delivering a heartfelt tribute to David's technical innovations and leadership qualities. He shared stories about David's persistence during difficult projects, his willingness to mentor younger developers, and his ability to find creative solutions to seemingly impossible problems. The crowd laughed and applauded, clearly moved by the genuine affection in Marcus's voice. Then it was Patricia's turn. She'd insisted on speaking, claiming special privilege as David's mother, and I'd reluctantly agreed rather than create pre-party drama. She stood gracefully, her silver hair perfectly styled, wearing the kind of elegant black dress that screamed expensive taste. "Good evening, everyone," Patricia began, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being heard. "As David's mother, I'm incredibly proud to see him receiving the recognition he's always deserved. From the time he was a small boy, I knew he was destined for great things." She launched into a carefully crafted narrative about David's childhood, his academic achievements, his early interest in technology. Everything she said was technically true, but somehow she managed to make it sound like David's success was the inevitable result of superior genetics and her exceptional parenting, rather than his own hard work and determination. "David has always been surrounded by people who recognized his potential," Patricia continued, her eyes briefly meeting mine across the crowd. "Of course, some people are naturally drawn to success, and David has been fortunate to attract support from those who could see what he might become." The words were carefully chosen, seemingly complimentary but carrying an undercurrent that made my skin crawl. She was laying groundwork for her favorite narrative, the one where I was a clever opportunist who had identified David's future value and positioned myself accordingly. "Family support has been crucial to David's journey," Patricia went on, warming to her theme. "And I'm proud that our family has always prioritized David's ambitions, sometimes making personal sacrifices to ensure he could reach his full potential." I felt David's hand find mine, his fingers tightening as he recognized the subtle implications in his mother's words. The suggestion that I had somehow sacrificed, or more likely that others had sacrificed for my benefit, was vintage Patricia, creating obligation and resentment with carefully chosen phrases. David's success reflects not just his own abilities, but the wisdom of those who chose to invest in his future early on, Patricia concluded, raising her champagne glass. "Sometimes the smartest thing you can do is recognize a good opportunity when you see it." The crowd applauded politely, but I noticed several of David's colleagues exchanging glances. Marcus looked particularly uncomfortable, clearly catching the subtext in Patricia's remarks. These were people who knew David and me as a couple, who had witnessed our partnership over the years, and Patricia's version of our story didn't align with what they'd observed. As Patricia lowered her glass, basking in the polite applause, Sophia stood up. She moved with the kind of calm confidence that reminded me of David when he was about to demonstrate a particularly elegant piece of code. "Thank you, Grandma Patricia," Sophia said, her voice carrying clearly across the suddenly quiet backyard. "That was really interesting. I'd like to add something, if that's okay." Patricia's smile faltered slightly, clearly not expecting to share her spotlight. "Of course, dear, though perhaps you should keep it brief." Sophia smiled, pulling her phone from the small purse she'd been carrying. "Don't worry, I'll be very specific." The tone of her voice made several people shift in their seats. David looked confused, glancing between his daughter and his mother with growing concern. I felt my heart rate accelerate, knowing we were approaching the moment that would change everything. "I've been thinking a lot lately about family support and recognizing opportunities," Sophia began, her voice steady and clear. "Grandma Patricia has taught me so much about both topics, especially during our car rides together." Patricia's expression shifted from confusion to wariness. Something in Sophia's tone was setting off alarm bells, but she couldn't quite identify the threat yet. "In fact," Sophia continued, "Grandma Patricia shared some really fascinating insights about Mom and Dad's relationship just last week. I thought everyone might be interested in hearing her perspective on how Mom cleverly positioned herself in Dad's life." The backyard went completely silent. Even the background noise of traffic and neighborhood sounds seemed to fade away. Patricia's face went white as she suddenly understood what was happening. "Sophia," Patricia said sharply, "I don't think this is the appropriate time for family discussions." "Oh, but you said these things in front of me," Sophia replied with devastating innocence. "And you're always telling me how important it is to learn from your wisdom. I thought Dad's colleagues would find it educational too, especially since they work so closely with him." She held up her phone, and I could see her finger hovering over the play button. "You said some really memorable things about how Mom saw Dad's potential before anyone else did, and how she made herself indispensable before he realized what was happening. You called it strategic thinking." David stepped forward, his face flushed with growing anger. "Mom, what is she talking about?" Patricia looked desperately around the crowd, realizing she was trapped. If she admitted to the conversation, she'd have to own her words. If she denied it, Sophia had evidence. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," Patricia said weakly. "No misunderstanding," Sophia said firmly. "I recorded our conversation because something felt wrong about it, and I wanted to be able to think about your words more carefully later. Would you like me to play it so everyone can understand your perspective on family support?" The threat hung in the air like smoke. Patricia looked at David, then at me, then at the crowd of his colleagues who were watching this family drama unfold with fascination and growing discomfort. Marcus cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should give the family some privacy to discuss this." "No," David said firmly, his voice carrying an authority I rarely heard. "If my mother said something about my wife to my daughter, I want to hear it. We all do." Patricia made one last desperate attempt to control the narrative. "Sophia, you're misunderstanding adult conversations. Sometimes when adults discuss complex situations—" "I'm 15, Sophia interrupted, her voice cutting through. Patricia's excuses like a blade. "I understand manipulation perfectly well, and I understand that telling someone's granddaughter that their mother trapped their father isn't family support. It's poison." The word poison seemed to echo across the silent backyard. Several guests shifted uncomfortably, while others leaned forward with obvious interest. David's face had gone from confusion to fury as he began to piece together what had happened. "Play it," he said quietly, his voice deadly calm. "Play whatever she said about my wife." Sophia looked at me, and I gave her the smallest nod. This was her moment, her choice, her chance to defend our family's truth. She'd been brave enough to collect the evidence. She deserved the right to present it. Okay, Sophia said simply, and pressed play. Patricia's voice filled the backyard, sweet and conspiratorial, sharing her toxic version of our love story with devastating clarity. As the recording played, I watched the faces of David's colleagues, saw their expressions shift from polite interest to shock to disgust. These were people who knew us, who had witnessed our partnership over the years, and Patricia's characterization of our relationship as calculated manipulation was clearly at odds with everything they'd observed. When the recording ended, the silence was deafening. Patricia stood frozen, her champagne glass still in her hand, looking like she wanted to disappear into the ground. David's face was flushed with rage, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. "Mom," he said, his voice shaking with emotion, "how could you say those things about Isabella? How could you say them to our daughter?" But Patricia was already gathering her purse, already moving toward the gate, her dignity in tatters. The woman who had spent years undermining my marriage with subtle suggestions and backhanded compliments had finally been exposed, and she couldn't face the consequences. As she fled into the night, leaving behind her untouched champagne and her shattered reputation, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, complete and total vindication. But more than that, I felt overwhelming pride in my daughter, who had found the courage to speak truth to power, to defend her family's integrity when the adults around her had failed to do so. The party continued, but everything had changed. David's colleagues rallied around us with supportive comments and expressions of disgust at Patricia's behavior. Marcus pulled me aside again, this time to apologize for witnessing such a painful family moment and to express his admiration for how Sophia had handled herself. But the real victory wasn't in Patricia's humiliation or the crowd's support. It was in watching my daughter stand tall, knowing she had done the right thing, understanding that sometimes love requires courage, and that truth, no matter how difficult, is always worth defending. The silence that followed Patricia's recording felt eternal, as if the entire universe had paused to absorb the weight of what had just been revealed. I watched my daughter standing there, phone still in hand, her chin raised with a quiet dignity that took my breath away. At 15, she had just done what I had been unable to do in 13 years of marriage. She had stripped away Patricia's carefully constructed facade and exposed the truth for everyone to see. David's face cycled through emotions like a time-lapse video, confusion melting into understanding, understanding hardening into anger, anger deepening into something that looked like grief. This wasn't just about defending me. This was about recognizing that his mother had deliberately tried to poison his daughter's understanding of love itself. "Isabella?" David said, his voice barely controlled. "How long has she been saying things like this?" Before I could answer, Marcus stepped forward, his expression serious but supportive. "David, man, I think we should give you some family time to process this. But I want you to know, everyone here who knows you and Isabella can see what you have together. What we just heard doesn't reflect reality, and it sure as hell doesn't reflect how your colleagues view your marriage." Several other guests nodded in agreement, and I felt a wave of gratitude wash over me. These weren't just David's professional contacts. They were people who had watched us navigate the challenges of building careers while raising a child, who had seen us celebrate each other's successes and support each other through difficulties. Sarah Martinez, one of David's project managers, approached with tears in her eyes. "Sophia," she said gently, "what you just did took incredible courage. I have a daughter your age, and I hope if she ever faces something like this, she'll have half your strength." But it was Dr. James Chen, no relation, despite the shared surname, who provided the perspective that would stick with me for years to come. Dr. Chen was a family therapist who happened to work with several tech companies on workplace wellness programs, and his presence at the party was purely coincidental. He approached our small group with the careful demeanor of someone who had seen too many families torn apart by toxic dynamics. "Sophia," he said quietly. What you did tonight was protect your family from psychological abuse. That recording documented what we call parental alienation, deliberately attempting to damage a child's relationship with their parent through lies and manipulation. You recognized it, documented it, and stopped it. That's not just brave. That's heroic. The word heroic seemed to resonate through the crowd. Several people who had been whispering among themselves fell silent, suddenly understanding that what they'd witnessed wasn't just family drama. It was a young woman, defending her family's truth against a sophisticated form of emotional abuse. As the immediate shock began to wear off, something beautiful started happening. Instead of the awkward dispersal I had expected, people began sharing their own stories. Marcus talked about his own difficult mother-in-law and how it had taken years to establish healthy boundaries. Sarah mentioned her struggles with a father who constantly undermined her career choices. Dr. Chen spoke about the long-term psychological impact of having family members who disguise cruelty as concern. What struck me most was how David's colleagues responded to learning about this hidden aspect of our lives. Rather than viewing it as unprofessional drama, they saw it as evidence of our family's strength. They had watched David's confidence and leadership grow over the years, and now they understood that this growth had happened despite significant family pressure, not because of it. You know what I admire most about this? Said Rebecca Kim, David's director of engineering. Sophia could have handled this privately, could have just stopped riding with her grandmother or asked her parents to intervene. Instead, she chose to create accountability. She understood that Patricia's behavior would continue until there were real consequences. Rebecca's observation highlighted something I hadn't fully appreciated. Sophia's approach had been strategic in the best possible way. She hadn't acted out of anger or impulse. She had methodically collected evidence, waited for the right moment, and chosen a venue where the truth would have maximum impact. She had essentially engineered an intervention, forcing Patricia to face the consequences of her behavior in front of the people whose respect she most wanted to maintain. As the evening progressed, I found myself in deeper conversations than I had expected. Jennifer Walsh, a senior developer who had worked with David for 3 years, pulled me aside to share her own experience with workplace discrimination. Isabella, she said, I've been watching how you and David support each other for years, and it's been a model for what I want in my own relationship. When I heard that recording, it made me realize how much strength it must have taken to build what you have while dealing with that kind of undermining. You've been fighting a war most of us didn't even know was happening. Her words hit me unexpectedly hard. For years, I had felt isolated in my struggle with Patricia, as if I were being overly sensitive or failing to handle family dynamics with sufficient grace. Hearing Jennifer acknowledge the difficulty of building a strong marriage while under constant subtle attack was like receiving validation I hadn't realized I desperately needed. But the most powerful conversation came from an unexpected source. Tom Bradley, one of David's newer team members, approached me near the end of the evening with obvious hesitation. Mrs. Chen, he said formally, I hope this isn't inappropriate, but I wanted to tell you something. My mother says things about my girlfriend that sound a lot like what we heard tonight. She disguises it as concern, but it's really about control. Watching Sophia stand up for your family tonight made me realize that I need to stop allowing it to continue. Tom was maybe 25, clearly still figuring out how to navigate adult relationships while maintaining family connections. Seeing him recognize the parallel between his situation and ours was both heartbreaking and inspiring. Sophia's courage was already rippling outward, inspiring others to examine their own family dynamics and consider taking action. Tom, I said gently, the hardest part is recognizing that setting boundaries isn't about punishing people. It's about protecting your relationship and your own peace of mind. You deserve to build something beautiful without having to constantly defend it. As the last guest departed, our house felt different. The energy was cleaner somehow, as if years of accumulated tension had finally been released. David, Sophia, and I stood in our backyard, surrounded by empty plates and glasses, looking at each other with a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. "I can't believe you did that," David said to Sophia, pulling her into a fierce hug. "I can't believe I let things go on for so long that you felt like you had to do that." "Dad," Sophia said, her voice muffled against his chest, "you didn't let anything happen. Grandma Patricia made choices, and I made a choice too. I chose to protect our family." The simple clarity of her statement took my breath away. At 15, my daughter understood something about family loyalty that had taken me years to learn. Sometimes love requires confrontation, sometimes protection requires exposure, and sometimes the kindest thing you can do is refuse to enable someone's destructive behavior. Over the following days, the ripple effects of that evening continued to unfold in ways I never could have anticipated. Patricia called exactly once, 3 days after the party, not to apologize, but to demand that we discuss this situation like adults. David's response was swift and unambiguous. There would be no discussion until she was prepared to take full responsibility for her actions and make genuine amends to both Sophia and me. "I'm not interested in managing your embarrassment, Mom," David told her during that brief phone call. "I'm interested in protecting my family from further emotional abuse. When you're ready to acknowledge what you did and commit to change, we can talk. Until then, we need space." The word space proved prophetic. Patricia's absence from our lives created room for growth and healing that I hadn't realized we needed. Sophia flourished with a new confidence, no longer carrying the weight of her grandmother's toxic messages. She started a peer mediation program at her school, helping other students navigate family conflicts and bullying situations. Her guidance counselor called to tell us that Sophia had become a sought-after mentor for younger students dealing with family dysfunction. David threw himself into family life with renewed energy, as if he were making up for years of divided loyalty. He started a father-daughter coding project with Sophia, teaching her programming languages while she taught him about social media marketing for his professional development. Their Saturday morning sessions became legendary in our house, filled with laughter, friendly competition, and the kind of easy intimacy that comes from shared purpose and mutual respect. But perhaps the most profound change was in my own relationship with David. With Patricia's influence removed, we rediscovered aspects of our partnership that had been buried under years of defensive positioning. We started having the kinds of deep, meandering conversations we'd enjoyed when we were first married, talking about our dreams, our fears, our hopes for Sophia's future. One evening, about 6 weeks after the party, David found me in my home office, working on a presentation for a major commercial listing. He sat down across from my desk with 2 cups of tea and that expression he gets when he's been thinking about something important. "I owe you an apology," he said without preamble. I looked up from my laptop, surprised. "For what?" "For years. Of asking you to be patient with my mother instead of protecting you from her. For prioritizing peace over truth. For making you feel like you had to handle her toxicity alone." His words hung in the air between us, heavy with years of accumulated hurt and misunderstanding. But instead of feeling vindicated or angry, I felt something unexpected. Compassion for the man who had been caught between 2 impossible loyalties. "David," I said gently, "you were trying to love us both. That's not a character flaw." "But I was enabling her," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. "I was so afraid of losing my mother that I was willing to let her slowly poison my marriage. If Sophia hadn't been brave enough to expose the truth, how much damage would I have allowed?" The question hung between us, unanswerable but important. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, processing the weight of what we'd learned about ourselves, our marriage, and our family dynamics. "You know what I realized watching Sophia that night?" David said eventually. "She wasn't protecting you from my mother. She was protecting all of us from a lie. She was protecting the truth about who we are as a family." His observation was profound in its simplicity. Sophia hadn't just defended me. She had defended the integrity of our family's story, refusing to let Patricia's narrative take root in her understanding of love and commitment. She had recognized that allowing lies to go unchallenged would eventually corrupt everything beautiful we had built together. The professional impact of that evening proved equally significant. Word spread through David's company about what had happened, and while I initially worried about the professional ramifications, the response was overwhelmingly positive. David's colleagues gained a deeper appreciation for his character, understanding that his kindness and patience weren't signs of weakness, but evidence of his commitment to doing the right thing, even under difficult circumstances. Marcus approached David a few weeks later with an unexpected opportunity. The company was launching a new initiative focused on workplace wellness and family support, and they wanted David to lead a pilot program addressing work-life balance in high-pressure careers. "Your family's situation opened a lot of eyes," Marcus explained. "People realize that even successful professionals can be dealing with family dysfunction that impacts their work performance. We want to create resources and support systems that help people navigate these challenges." David's new role allowed him to combine his technical skills with his growing understanding of family dynamics and emotional intelligence. He began speaking at conferences about sustainable career growth and the importance of healthy family boundaries. His presentations, often featuring insights he'd gained from our recent experiences, resonated powerfully with audiences dealing with their own family challenges. But the most meaningful validation came from an unexpected source. Dr. Chen, the family therapist who had attended the party, contacted us several months later with a request. He was developing a training program for family therapy professionals about recognizing and addressing parental alienation, and he wanted to use our story as a case study in successful intervention. What Sophia did represents a textbook example of how family members can effectively counter psychological manipulation, he explained during our initial consultation. Her approach, documentation, strategic timing, public accountability, created the kind of consequences that actually change behavior patterns. Working with Dr. Chen to develop training materials gave us a new perspective on our experience. What had felt like a painful family crisis was actually a powerful example of resilience, courage, and effective boundary setting. Sophia's actions weren't just brave, they were therapeutically sound, demonstrating an intuitive understanding of family systems that impressed professional counselors. The training program launched 8 months after our party, with video testimonials from our family about the importance of supporting young people who recognize toxic family dynamics. Sophia, now 16 and even more confident than before, spoke eloquently about the importance of trusting your instincts when something feels wrong, even if the person causing harm is someone you're supposed to love unconditionally. "Love doesn't mean accepting abuse," she said in her recorded interview. "Real love means protecting the people you care about from harm, even if that means standing up to family members who aren't acting with love." Her words became a cornerstone of the training program, helping family therapists understand how to empower young people to recognize and resist manipulation. The program has since been implemented in family counseling centers across the country, with Sophia's story serving as inspiration for countless families dealing with similar dynamics. As I write this, almost a year has passed since that transformative evening in our backyard. Patricia has made no effort to apologize or repair the relationships she damaged. She sends birthday cards to Sophia with generic messages and no acknowledgement of what happened. David has accepted that his mother may never be capable of the kind of honest self-reflection that would make reconciliation possible. But her absence has allowed our family to flourish in ways I never could have imagined. Sophia is thriving, academically and socially, having developed a reputation as someone who stands up for others and refuses to tolerate bullying or manipulation. David has found new purpose in his work, combining technical expertise with a passion for helping others navigate complex family dynamics. And our marriage has deepened in ways that surprise me daily, built now on a foundation of complete honesty and mutual protection. The evening that could have destroyed our family celebration instead became the beginning of our family's liberation. Sophia's courage to speak truth to power didn't just silence Patricia. It amplified our family's authentic voice, allowing us to finally tell our own story without interference or distortion. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the courage to see clearly, to stop making excuses for behavior that damages the people you love. Sophia gave that gift to all of us that night, and in doing so, she transformed not just our family, but the families of everyone who witnessed her brave stand for truth. The transformation that followed that pivotal evening rippled through our lives in ways I could never have anticipated. What began as a moment of exposure became a catalyst for growth that extended far beyond our immediate family. As the months unfolded, I watched my daughter evolve from a teenager who had found the courage to speak truth into a young woman who understood her power to create positive change in the world around her. Sophia's confidence didn't manifest as arrogance or rebellion. Instead, it bloomed into a quiet leadership that drew people toward her. At school, she became known as someone who could be trusted with difficult situations, someone who would listen without judgment and offer solutions. Rooted in both compassion and practical wisdom, her English teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, called me one afternoon to share an extraordinary development. "Isabella," she said, her voice filled with admiration, "Sophia has become something of a mentor for students dealing with family dysfunction. 3 different kids have come to her this semester with problems ranging from divorced parents using them as messengers to grandparents who undermine their self-esteem. She doesn't just offer sympathy. She helps them develop strategies for protecting themselves while maintaining family relationships." The irony wasn't lost on me. Patricia's attempt to poison Sophia's understanding of family loyalty had instead equipped her with the tools to help others navigate similar challenges. Sophia had learned to distinguish between love and manipulation, between support and control, between protecting people and enabling their destructive behavior. During our weekly mother-daughter coffee dates, a tradition we'd started after the party to ensure open communication, Sophia shared stories that both amazed and humbled me. She told me about helping her friend Marcus develop responses to his father's constant criticism about his career interests. She described coaching her classmate Sarah through the process of setting boundaries with an aunt who constantly compared her to her more academically successful cousins. "The thing is, Mom," Sophia explained one Saturday morning over her favorite vanilla latte, "once you learn to recognize manipulation, you can't unsee it. And once you know you have the power to stop it, you can't pretend you don't." Her words captured something profound about personal growth and social responsibility. Knowledge creates obligation. Understanding demands action. Sophia had learned these lessons earlier than most, but she was using them to create positive change rather than becoming cynical or hardened. The ripple effects extended into my own professional life in unexpected ways. Word of our family's experience spread through the real estate community, partly because several of David's colleagues had wives who worked in related fields. Instead of viewing our family drama as a liability, potential clients began seeking me out specifically because they saw me as someone who understood complex family dynamics. Eleanor Martinez, a successful architect going through a difficult divorce, hired me to help her find a new home, partly because she'd heard about our story through mutual connections. During our first meeting, she was direct about her reasoning. "Isabella," she said, "I'm dealing with my ex-husband's family trying to turn my children against me. They're using the kind of subtle manipulation that's hard to prove, but devastating to experience. I need to work with someone who understands that buying a home isn't just about square footage and school districts. It's about creating a safe space where my kids can develop their own understanding of what healthy relationships look like." Eleanor's situation opened my eyes to how many families were struggling with similar dynamics. Over the following months, I found myself working with an increasing number of clients who were rebuilding their lives after recognizing toxic family patterns. Some were divorce survivors like Eleanor. Others were young couples trying to establish independence from controlling parents. Still others were empty nesters finally ready to live according to their own values, rather than family expectations. Each client taught me something new about resilience and reinvention. Margaret Chen, again, no relation despite the surname, was a 68-year-old woman who hired me after finally deciding to leave the family home where she'd endured 40 years of her mother-in-law's passive-aggressive comments. "I kept thinking I needed to be the bigger person," Margaret told me as we toured condominiums with private entrances and no space for extended family visits. "I thought keeping peace was more important than keeping my sanity. But watching your daughter stand up for your family made me realize that I've been modeling the wrong values for my own grandchildren. I want them to see that you can love someone and still refuse to accept poor treatment." Margaret's decision to prioritize her own well-being after decades of self-sacrifice inspired her entire family. Her adult children, who had watched her endure years of subtle mistreatment, found the courage to establish their own boundaries with the family matriarch. Her grandchildren learned that love doesn't require accepting disrespect, and that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable someone's harmful behavior. The professional growth I experienced during this period led to an unexpected opportunity. The National Association of Realtors invited me to speak at their annual conference about serving clients who were rebuilding their lives after family trauma. My presentation, titled "Creating Safe Harbors: Real Estate as Sanctuary," addressed the unique needs of people escaping toxic family dynamics. For many of our clients, I told the audience of several hundred real estate professionals, buying a home isn't just about finding the right property. It's about creating physical and emotional distance from relationships that have been harmful to their well-being. Our job is to understand that we're not just helping them find houses. We're helping them build foundations for healthier futures. The response was overwhelming. Real estate agents from across the country approached me afterward to share their own experiences with clients fleeing family dysfunction. Many expressed frustration at feeling unprepared to support these clients effectively, and several requested follow-up training sessions. This led to the development of a specialized certification program for real estate professionals working with family transition clients. The curriculum covered recognizing signs of family trauma, understanding the unique housing needs of people establishing independence from toxic relationships, and providing appropriate resources and referrals. David, meanwhile, was experiencing his own professional renaissance. His work on the Family Wellness Initiative had evolved into a comprehensive program that addressed workplace stress, family boundary setting, and the intersection of personal and professional well-being. His presentations at technology conferences consistently drew standing-room-only crowds, with audience members sharing their own stories of family challenges and professional success. One particularly powerful speaking engagement came when David was invited to address the Young Professionals Network at his former university. Standing before an audience of recent graduates and early career professionals, he shared lessons that went far beyond technical skills or career advancement strategies. "Success isn't just about climbing the corporate ladder," David told the eager young faces in the auditorium. "It's about defining success on your own terms and having the courage to protect that definition from people who want to change it, even if those people are family members who claim to have your best interests at heart." He went on to describe the years he'd spent trying to balance loyalty to his mother with protection of his wife and daughter, and how that impossible balance had nearly cost him the relationships that truly mattered. His vulnerability resonated powerfully with the audience, many of whom were navigating their own struggles with family expectations and personal autonomy. "The most important skill I've developed in my career," David concluded, "isn't coding or project management or technical leadership. It's the ability to recognize when someone is asking me to compromise my values in the name of keeping peace, and the courage to say no." The speech was recorded and shared widely on professional development platforms, eventually garnering over 1 million views. Comments poured in from viewers who felt inspired to examine their own family dynamics and make difficult but necessary changes. David began receiving invitations to speak at corporations struggling with workplace culture issues, helping organizations understand how family dysfunction can impact professional performance and team dynamics. But perhaps the most meaningful development was watching how our experience influenced other families in our immediate community. The story of Sophia's courageous stand spread through our neighborhood, our schools, and our social circles, inspiring others to examine their own family dynamics with fresh eyes. Jessica and Mark Thompson, our neighbors for over a decade, approached us 6 months after the party with a remarkable story. Their teenage son Alex had been struggling with depression and anxiety, and they'd been unable to identify the source despite extensive counseling and medical evaluation. After hearing about our experience, they began paying closer attention to family interactions during holiday gatherings. We realized that Mark's father had been making subtle comments about Alex's lack of motivation and need for tougher discipline for years, Jessica explained during a backyard conversation that mirrored many we'd had since the party. We thought he was just being a concerned grandfather, but Alex finally told us that those comments made him feel worthless and stupid. The Thompsons implemented firm boundaries with the grandfather, limiting his access to Alex and refusing to allow critical comments during family gatherings. Within months, Alex's mental health improved dramatically, and the family dynamic shifted towards support and encouragement rather than criticism and control. Your daughter showed us that sometimes kids can see toxic patterns more clearly than adults, Mark said. We stopped dismissing Alex's feelings as teenage drama and started listening to what he was really telling us about how family interactions affected him. Similar stories emerged from other families in our community. The Martinez family confronted an aunt who had been making disparaging comments about their daughter's weight. The Johnson family established boundaries with grandparents who consistently undermined their parenting decisions. The Kim family addressed a pattern of favoritism that had been damaging their children's relationships with each other. Each family's journey was unique, but they all shared common elements: recognition of harmful patterns, courage to address them directly, and commitment to protecting family members from emotional abuse disguised as love or concern. Sophia's example had given them permission to prioritize emotional safety over traditional family hierarchy. The academic community also took notice of our story. Dr. Chen's training program had grown into a research initiative studying family, resilience, and intervention strategies. Sophia agreed to participate in a longitudinal study tracking the long-term effects of family members who successfully challenged toxic dynamics. What makes your daughter's case so significant, Dr. Chen explained during one of our research interviews, is that she intervened at a crucial developmental stage. Most people don't develop the skills to recognize and resist family manipulation until well into adulthood, if ever. Sophia's early intervention prevented years of psychological damage and created a model for other young people facing similar situations. The research findings were striking. Families where young people were empowered to challenge toxic dynamics showed significantly better long-term outcomes in terms of mental health, relationship satisfaction, and academic or professional achievement. The study reinforced the importance of teaching children to trust their instincts about family relationships and to understand that love doesn't require accepting mistreatment. As Sophia's junior year of high school progressed, she began exploring colleges with programs in psychology, social work, and family counseling. Her personal statement for college applications focused on her desire to help families develop healthier communication patterns and boundary-setting skills. "I used to think that family problems were just something you had to endure," she wrote in her essay. "But I learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable someone's harmful behavior. I want to help other families learn that lesson before they spend years suffering in silence." Her college interviews were remarkable to witness. Admissions counselors were consistently impressed not just by her academic achievements, but by her emotional maturity and clear sense of purpose. Several specifically commented on her ability to discuss difficult family dynamics with both honesty and compassion, never speaking badly of her grandmother, while also refusing to minimize the impact of her behavior. The college application process also led to unexpected healing in our extended family. David's younger brother Michael, who had remained largely neutral during our conflict with Patricia, reached out as we began visiting universities on the East Coast where he lived. "I owe you an apology," Michael said during a dinner at his home in Boston. "I knew Mom was saying inappropriate things about Isabella, but I convinced myself it wasn't my place to interfere." Watching how Sophia handled the situation made me realize that staying neutral in the face of family dysfunction isn't neutral at all. It's enabling. Michael's acknowledgement meant more to David than I had expected. For years, David had felt isolated within his own family, caught between his mother's demands and his wife's well-being. Having his brother validate our experience and acknowledge the courage it had taken to set boundaries created a foundation for rebuilding their relationship on healthier terms. "The thing is," Michael continued, "I have kids too. And I realized I was teaching them to ignore problems rather than address them. That's not the kind of family legacy I want to pass down." This conversation led to broader changes in David's extended family. Michael began setting boundaries with Patricia around her comments about his own wife and children. Other relatives, emboldened by examples of successful boundary setting, started addressing their own concerns about family dynamics that had bothered them for years. The changes weren't always smooth or immediately successful. Some family members accused us of destroying the family or being unwilling to forgive. But the consistency of our message, that love requires respect, and that family relationships must be based on mutual consideration rather than obligation, gradually shifted the family culture toward healthier interactions. 1 year after the party that changed everything, we hosted another celebration, this time for Sophia's acceptance to her first-choice university with a full scholarship based on her academic achievements and community service. The guest list was smaller but more meaningful, including only people who had supported our family's growth and healing. As I looked around our backyard that evening, watching Sophia laugh with friends who genuinely cared about her well-being, seeing David relaxed and confident in ways I hadn't witnessed in years, I felt overwhelming gratitude for the journey that had brought us to this point. The path hadn't been easy. Confronting family dysfunction never is. But Sophia's courage to speak truth had liberated all of us from patterns that were slowly eroding our happiness and self-respect. She had shown us that sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to enable someone's harmful behavior, even when that someone is family. That evening, as guests shared stories and offered toasts to Sophia's future, I realized that our experience had taught us something invaluable about the difference between family loyalty and family health. True loyalty doesn't require accepting mistreatment. It requires creating environments where everyone can thrive. Real love doesn't demand silence in the face of harm. It demands courage to protect the people we care about from toxic influences. As the evening wound down and Sophia opened cards from friends and family members, I found a quiet moment to reflect on how much had changed since that recording had played in this same space 12 months earlier. We had lost Patricia's presence in our lives, but we had gained something far more valuable: the ability to build relationships based on honesty, respect, and genuine care for each other's well-being. The girl who had stood up with a phone in her hand and truth on her lips had become a young woman ready to take that same courage out into the world. And the family that had been slowly fracturing under the weight of hidden resentment and unaddressed toxicity had become stronger, healthier, and more authentic than we had ever been before. Sometimes the most difficult conversations lead to the most beautiful transformations. Sometimes standing up to family requires becoming more family than you've ever been. And sometimes a teenager's refusal to accept lies as love creates space for truth so powerful it changes not just one family, but everyone lucky enough to witness courage in action. Our story didn't end with Patricia's departure from our lives. It began with our family's decision to choose truth over comfort, health over tradition, and authentic love over toxic loyalty. That choice, initiated by a 15-year-old girl with a recording and a fierce determination to protect her family's truth, became the foundation for a life more genuine and joyful than we had ever imagined possible. In the end, Sophia didn't just expose her grandmother's lies. She revealed our family's strength, our capacity for growth, and our commitment to building something beautiful based on honesty rather than obligation. That revelation continues to inspire everyone whose life it touches, creating ripples of positive change that extend far beyond our backyard and into communities hungry for examples of courage, authenticity, and love that truly protects rather than simply endures. 2 years have passed since that transformative evening, and as I write this final chapter of our story, I'm sitting in Sophia's dorm room at Stanford University, helping her arrange the last of her belongings before I head home. The walls are covered with photos from her high school graduation, family vacations, and volunteer work with the campus peer counseling center. But the image that draws my attention most is a framed quote she's hung above her desk. "Courage is not the absence of fear but action in spite of it." Sophia has become everything I hoped she would and more. At 17, she's already making an impact on her university campus that extends far beyond her academic achievements. She founded a support group called Authentic Families for students, dealing with toxic family dynamics, and it's become one of the most sought-after resources at the counseling center. "Mom," she said as we arranged her textbooks, "I got a call yesterday from a freshman whose grandmother has been telling her that her parents' interracial marriage is an experiment that will fail. She wanted to know if I thought she should confront her grandmother or just try to ignore it." The fact that students were seeking out my daughter for guidance on complex family issues filled me with pride and awe. But what impressed me most was her response. "I told her that ignoring toxicity doesn't make it disappear. It just gives it more time to spread," Sophia continued. "But I also helped her think through different approaches, from private conversations to family meetings to setting clear boundaries. Every situation is unique, but the principle remains the same. You don't have to accept emotional abuse just because it comes from family." Her wisdom humbles me daily. At an age when most young people are still figuring out their own identity, Sophia has developed a clear understanding of healthy relationship dynamics and the courage to help others navigate difficult situations. She's planning to double major in psychology and communications, with the goal of becoming a family therapist who specializes in helping young people develop healthy boundary-setting skills. The impact of her work is already measurable. Dr. Sarah Williams, the director of the University Counseling Center, called me last month to share remarkable statistics. "Isabella," she said, "since Sophia started her support group, we've seen a 40% increase in students seeking help for family dysfunction, but we've also seen a 60% improvement in successful outcomes for those cases. Students are coming in earlier, they're more articulate about their experiences, and they're better prepared to implement healthy coping strategies." Dr. Williams went on to explain that Sophia's approach emphasized empowerment rather than just emotional support. Instead of simply helping students process their pain, she taught them practical skills for protecting their mental health while maintaining family relationships where possible. "What makes Sophia so effective," Dr. Williams continued, "is that she's lived through this experience herself. She's not offering theoretical advice. She's sharing proven strategies that work in real-world family situations." The success of Sophia's college program has attracted attention from universities across the country. She's been invited to speak at conferences about peer counseling and family dynamics, and several schools have asked for help developing similar programs on their campuses. But perhaps most remarkably, Her work has begun influencing how families approach these issues before they reach crisis points. The training materials Dr. Chen developed based on our story have now been implemented in over 300 family counseling centers nationwide, and the success rates for families dealing with manipulation and emotional abuse have improved dramatically. David's career has evolved in equally inspiring directions. His work on family wellness initiatives has led to a consulting practice that helps corporations address how family dysfunction impacts workplace productivity and employee satisfaction. He's discovered that many companies lose talented employees, not because of job dissatisfaction, but because of family stress that makes it difficult for people to maintain consistent performance. The traditional approach to employee assistance programs focused on individual therapy and stress management, David explained during a recent presentation to Fortune 500 executives. But we've learned that many workplace performance issues stem from family dynamics that require systemic intervention rather than individual treatment. His consulting firm, Authentic Workplace Solutions, has worked with over 50 companies to develop policies that support employees dealing with family dysfunction. These include flexible scheduling for employees attending family therapy, employee resource groups for people establishing independence from toxic family members, and training for managers to recognize when family stress is impacting work performance. The results have been extraordinary. Companies implementing David's recommendations have seen measurable improvements in employee retention, job satisfaction, and overall productivity. More importantly, they've created environments where people feel safe discussing family challenges, without fear of professional repercussions. One of David's most successful interventions involved a technology startup where the CEO's mother was regularly calling employees to complain about her son's business decisions. The situation was creating chaos in the workplace, with staff members feeling caught between professional loyalty and family drama. The CEO was mortified when he realized what was happening, David recounted. He'd been so focused on not hurting his mother's feelings that he hadn't considered how her behavior was affecting his entire team. We worked together to establish clear boundaries between family relationships and professional responsibilities. The intervention saved the company from what could have been devastating turnover during a crucial growth phase. It also provided the CEO with strategies for maintaining family relationships while protecting his professional environment, skills that have served him well as his business has continued to expand. My own career has taken directions I never could have anticipated. The specialized real estate practice I developed for families escaping toxic dynamics has grown into a comprehensive relocation service that includes counseling referrals, legal resources, and support groups for people rebuilding their lives. But the work that gives me the most satisfaction is the mentorship program I started for women dealing with difficult mother-in-law relationships. Every month, I host gatherings where women can share their experiences, learn boundary setting techniques, and develop strategies for protecting their marriages and children from family manipulation. The isolation is often the worst part, explained Maria Santos during a recent meeting. You feel like you're the only one dealing with a mother-in-law who undermines your parenting or makes passive-aggressive comments about your housekeeping. Finding out that other women have similar experiences and have found ways to address them successfully is incredibly empowering. Maria's situation was particularly challenging because her mother-in-law lived in the same neighborhood and expected daily visits. The constant criticism and boundary violations were affecting Maria's mental health and her relationship with her husband, who struggled to see his mother's behavior as problematic. Through our group sessions, Maria learned to document incidents, communicate her concerns clearly to her husband, and establish non-negotiable boundaries around her children's well-being. The process wasn't easy and required months of consistent effort, but the results transformed her family's dynamics. I realized that I'd been so focused on being respectful to his mother that I wasn't being respectful to myself, Maria reflected 6 months later. Learning to advocate for my own needs actually made me a better wife and mother, because I stopped modeling acceptance of poor treatment for my children. The mentorship program has expanded to include online resources, weekend workshops, and a book I'm writing about navigating difficult in-law relationships. The working title is Love Doesn't Require Silence, A Guide to Healthy Family Boundaries, and it will include stories from dozens of families who have successfully addressed toxic dynamics. But perhaps the most meaningful development has been watching how our story continues to inspire families around the world. The video of Sophia speaking at the National Association of Family Therapists conference has been viewed over 2 million times, and emails pour in weekly from families who have found the courage to address their own dysfunction after hearing her story. One particularly moving message came from Jennifer Park, a mother in Seattle whose 15-year-old son had been struggling with depression and anxiety. Jennifer's mother-in-law had been making critical comments about the boy's academic performance and social skills, disguising the criticism as helpful observations. After watching your daughter's speech, my son asked if he could record some conversations with his grandmother, Jennifer wrote. When we listened to the recordings together, I was horrified by how consistently critical and undermining she was being. My son had been internalizing her messages and blaming himself for not meeting her impossible standards. Jennifer's family implemented boundaries similar to the ones we had established, and her son's mental health improved dramatically within months. More importantly, he learned valuable lessons about recognizing and resisting manipulation that will serve him throughout his life. My son said something that really stuck with me, Jennifer's email continued. He said, I thought I had to accept whatever family members said to me because they were older and supposedly loved me. But now I understand that real love doesn't make you feel worthless. Stories like Jennifer's arrive regularly, each one reinforcing the importance of the work we've been doing and the far-reaching impact of standing up for family truth. But they also highlight how common these dynamics are and how desperately families need resources and support for addressing them. The research community has continued studying our case and others like it, developing increasingly sophisticated understanding of family manipulation and effective intervention strategies. Dr. Chen recently published a groundbreaking study showing that families where young people successfully challenge toxic dynamics experience lasting improvements in communication patterns and overall mental health. What we've learned, Dr. Chen explained during a recent conference presentation, is that toxic family patterns are often maintained through silence and enablement. When one family member finds the courage to expose destructive behavior, it creates space for healing and growth that benefits everyone involved. The study followed 40 families over 3 years, tracking outcomes for both the individuals who spoke up and the family systems as a whole. The results were remarkable. Families that addressed manipulation directly showed significant improvements in relationship satisfaction, mental health metrics, and overall family functioning. But the research also revealed something equally important. The individuals who found the courage to challenge family dysfunction went on to develop stronger leadership skills, better communication abilities, and more satisfying relationships throughout their lives. Speaking truth to family power, it turns out, builds character traits that serve people well in all aspects of their existence. As Sophia prepares for her sophomore year at Stanford, she's been accepted into a prestigious research program studying family resilience and intervention strategies. She'll be working directly with Dr. Chen and other leading researchers to develop new approaches for helping families heal from decades of toxic patterns. I want to understand not just how to help individuals protect themselves from family manipulation, Sophia explained as we finished organizing her room, but how to help entire family systems evolve toward healthier patterns of interaction. Her research focus represents the next evolution of our family's journey. We began with a personal crisis and individual healing, but we've learned that lasting change requires addressing systemic family patterns that often span generations. Sophia's research proposal focuses on developing intervention strategies that can help families transform toxic dynamics into healthy ones, rather than simply managing or escaping harmful relationships. It's ambitious work that could benefit millions of families struggling with similar challenges. The goal isn't to destroy Families, Sophia clarified. It's to help them become the loving, supportive systems they're supposed to be. Sometimes that requires confronting difficult truths, but the alternative is watching family members slowly erode each other's well-being over decades. Her perspective reflects a maturity and wisdom that continues to amaze me. At 19, she understands complex family dynamics better than many adult therapists, and she's using that understanding to create positive change on a scale that extends far beyond our personal experience. As our visit comes to an end and I prepare to return home to David, I find myself reflecting on the journey that began with a toxic mother-in-law's manipulation and led to a family transformation that has touched thousands of lives. What started as a defensive response to emotional abuse has become a movement toward healthier family relationships and authentic love. Patricia never apologized or acknowledged the harm she caused. She never expressed interest in rebuilding relationships on healthier terms. In some ways, her consistent refusal to take responsibility validated our decision to establish firm boundaries. We learned that some people are simply not capable of the self-reflection and behavior change that healthy relationships require. But her absence from our lives has created space for extraordinary growth and healing. David has become more confident and emotionally available than ever before. I've discovered professional and personal fulfillment I never could have imagined. And Sophia has developed into a remarkable young woman whose courage and wisdom continue, inspiring others to choose truth over comfort. Our family's story has become bigger than our individual experience. It's become a testament to the power of speaking truth, the importance of protecting family well-being over family hierarchy, and the transformative potential of courage in the face of generations of dysfunction. The emails, calls, and messages we receive regularly remind us that our experience resonates with people around the world who are struggling with similar challenges. Knowing that Sophia's moment of courage has inspired others to find their own voices makes every difficult step of our journey feel worthwhile. As I hug my daughter goodbye and head to the airport, I carry with me not just pride in who she's become, but excitement about the positive change she'll continue creating in the world. The girl who stood up at a family celebration with a recording, and the truth has become a woman whose work will help families heal for generations to come. Our story didn't end with one brave moment or one family's healing. It began with our decision to choose authenticity over approval, truth over tradition, and healthy love over toxic loyalty. That choice continues creating ripples of positive change that extend far beyond what we ever could have imagined when Sophia first pressed play on that recording 2 years ago. Sometimes the most important thing you can do is refuse to accept unacceptable behavior, even when it comes from people you're supposed to love unconditionally. Sometimes protecting your family means standing up to family. And sometimes a teenager's courage to speak truth becomes the foundation for healing that transforms not just one family, but countless others who find inspiration in authenticity triumphing over manipulation. In the end, love doesn't require silence. It requires courage, honesty, and the strength to protect what matters most. Our family learned that lesson through pain and growth, and we've spent the years since teaching it to others who need permission to choose their own well-being over toxic family expectations. The girl with the recording changed everything, not just for us, but for everyone whose life has been touched by her example of courage in action. And that change continues growing, inspiring families around the world to choose truth, healing, and authentic love over the comfort of familiar dysfunction. That's the real power of speaking up. It doesn't just free you from toxic patterns. It creates space for something beautiful to grow in their place. Something honest, healthy, and genuinely loving. Something worth protecting, defending, and sharing. With a world that desperately needs examples of families choosing truth over tradition and love over loyalty to harmful patterns. Our story is proof that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is trust a teenager's instincts about family dynamics and support their courage to speak truth that adults have been avoiding for years. In our case, that trust transformed not just our family, but created a legacy of healing that will continue inspiring positive change for decades to come. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.